Hi guys, and welcome to another Sailing Nendaz video. In this week's episode, we have a sit down and we talk about that time that we hit a rock. Where do we start? This is not a clickbait title. These are genuine events, and honestly, it's not probably, this is definitely our scariest moment on the boat.
Well, at that point, yeah, it was
Today.
definitely our scariest moment on the boat.
This isn't like a grounding incident where you just go a bit shallow in your anchorage and you just like touch the bottom. This is like we were mid-passage, sailing on the west coast of Spain. Pretty remote. There's not a lot of anything out there. Yeah, we were coming around a headland and we hit a rock.
And we're off! We have left
Praia de
Aguera, and now we're going to Ilote Guidoiro Areoso Norte. It's like in the Rio de Rusa, before you get fully into the Rio, there's like not at the very edge, but like slightly in, there's an island, which looks really pretty, and it saves us going fully into the Rio because we need to go on to Vigo to go and fix our autopilot. So we're off, and the best bit is at the moment, there are loads of orca attacks, which are happening off of this bit of coastline, and we were in Muros yesterday and the day before. Yeah, and we met a really nice couple of Dutch families who were doing a similar thing to us, travelling the same sort of way, and one of them was leaving the same day, and so they suggested we joined their little squad of other Dutch sailing vessels all heading off today. So we are honorary Dutch people today, aren't we? Mm-hmm. And there's one over there, and then there's two behind us. And we're hoping that it'll be safety in numbers, and that if anything happened, then there's lots of other boats around to be able to help. So fingers crossed, nothing will happen though.
Hello.
The setting for the day, picture this. It was like beautiful blue sky, really flat seas, like one of the nicest sailing conditions I would say that we've been in so far. And
Yeah,
I was
really
working
nice.
down below. And it was really nice, and like I wasn't feeling sick or anything, which is quite unusual for when we've been sailing so far. And I remember coming up onto the deck about 12:30ish. It was really sunny, so I lay down for a little sunbathe and had a bit of lunch and things like that.
We were hand steering the whole wave as well, because if you watch the last video, which we can put a little link maybe up there or up in that corner, the tiller arm off the rudder stock broke, so we basically had no autopilot, so we were hand steering the whole of this passage. We tried to find a welder in Muros, but there was no welder who could do stainless steel.
And we were on our way to a really pretty looking anchorage in Rio de Rusa with the other Dutch boats that we'd met a few days before. So there were three other boats that were sailing around. One of them peeled off later on, but there were three of us that were sailing around to this anchorage together.
About an hour or so later, we rounded basically a bit of headland, a piece of land that sticks out quite far into the sea, and this was called Cabo Corrubedo. We were just sort of sailing along blissfully. It was like surreally beautiful, super relaxed, and then it was just bang, like massive bang.
So loud. It was so loud.
The whole boat like shuddering.
The rigging shook, like everything. And I remember like being lurched, and Joe was standing at the helm, like steering, and I remember him like not flying forwards, but sort of falling forwards, and he was holding on to something, so he fell forwards. I was like lying down, and I fell slightly like back into where I was lying more, and I like sat up and I just ran downstairs and started. I just remember like I thought we'd hit like the prop or something, so I remember like pulled out I think we had the engine on, because I pulled out the stairs to check the engine. I thought something had gone wrong.
We were motoring, there was no wind at all.
Oh yeah, that was it. I thought something had gone wrong with the engine. But no, engine like was fine. And then I was like, oh no, wait, because I mean, this is what, like less than 10 seconds after it happened. So then I was like, oh shit, no, we've hit a rock. So then I was like looking, I pulled up the floorboards and I was like looking to see if we were taking on water. So I was like pulling up the floor. It felt like it was around the kitchen that had happened. So I like picked up the floorboards around the kitchen. And was pulling those up to see if there was any water coming in. And I don't know, like my head just wasn't there. And I was like, I felt like it had hit the side of the hull, like it felt like the boat had sort of gone up and been pushed slightly to one side. But yeah, basically checked everything, and then I was like, I don't think there's anything coming in through the hull to Joe, and Joe was like, it will have hit the keel, it will have hit the keel, and I was like, oh yeah, of course. So then I went further forward in the boat and started pulling up the floorboards around where the keel bolts are, looked at those, and I could see one of the keel bolts had like slight splitting to the fiberglass. So then I shouted that to Joe, and Joe was like, but do we have any water coming in? And I was like, no, there's no water. Left all the floorboards up, and then but I remember as well, you were like, communicate with me, because I wasn't saying anything. I was just pulling up the floorboards in my head, doing like a checklist of being like, okay, no water here, no water here, no water here. But Joe had no information up there and couldn't see anything, so he didn't know what was going on at all. So then I went up, and then we swapped over and I helmed for a bit while you went down below and checked it all.
Yeah, so the keel bolts are fiberglassed over, and that's like a manufacturing process. So because they're steel bolts, you fiberglass over them, it stops them getting any water on them, it stops them rusting. And what had happened is one of the bits of fiberglass had managed to pop off, so there's obviously some movement. The keel had obviously been sort of forced down or up into the hull slightly.
The reason it happened is that we were following these Dutch boats around this corner, and we'd seen them go around the corner like, I don't know, maybe
well, they were
5
like
minutes before.
500 metres, 400 metres ahead of us. They'd already gone round the headland. We were just sort of blindly following them, like blindly following their bottom, so steering like a direct course to their bum, which basically just meant that we slightly cut this corner, and we slightly cut it by like 10 or 20 metres, and that was just enough because there was this sort of rock and a really shallow section of like shoal or rocky area, and we just sailed right over the corner of it. And you'll see this on the screen, you'll see we've got some navionics, like a track of our GPS track, and you can see exactly what we did. And you look at it and you just think, oh, you're such an idiot. and that's exactly what I was feeling. I was hand steering because we didn't have any autopilot, and I was just so angry. I just felt so stupid at how I could let something happen that it's just so easy to avoid.
But it was just
so
a combination.
Angry, basically.
Yeah, I understand that, but it was just a combination of events, and like everyone makes mistakes. You're human. It's fine. It's just we're really lucky that the mistake that happened was like.
So and the reason why we're so close to the coast is because there's a big orca scare down the Portuguese Spanish coast, and again, if you look at the previous video, you can hear some VHF footage of a boat being attacked, and it's just really scary to listen to. It was like 10 miles away from where we were. We were there 10 miles before, 2 hours ago, and they got attacked, and it could have been us. So basically, one of the easiest ways to not get attacked, because if you do get attacked or have an orca interaction, the chances are you'll lose your rudder, and on some occasions they do so much damage to your rudder that you then take on water. And there's been two or three boats that have sunk now. 2
sailing yachts, 1 fishing.
So the easiest way to mitigate this is to basically stay in shallow water, because the orcas tend to stick in the deeper stuff. So we're coast hopping, staying as close as we can really safely stay to the coast. And that's one of the extra reasons why were we this close to the coast in the first place. That's why, because ordinarily you just can go out a couple miles to sea and sail straight down the coast, and you don't need to really worry about anything, because you're away from fishing buoys, you're away from away from land, and you don't have to worry about orcas.
And then the autopilot thing, like if we'd had the autopilot on, we'd have been following a course that meant we weren't going anywhere near these rocks anyway. So it's just a series of unfortunate events.
Just lapse of concentration and some other factors that contributed to it. But
at this point we'd sort of resolved that there was no water coming in at that moment, but we were still nervous because you never know what damage you've actually done to the bottom of your boat. So we didn't know whether, like, yeah, there's no water coming in right now, but if we hit a big wave or something, the keel's just going to drop off. You don't know what's happened.
Yeah.
So we carried on around the corner to the head.
We basically carried on sailing to our anchorage. It was another couple hours. And we didn't, well, there's barely any footage from the day because obviously it doesn't really make you want to record any footage when you hit a rock and you think you're going to lose the boat. Like, so there's barely anything of the day. We recorded a little bit as we came into the anchorage, which you'll see now. And we had to dodge a load of like farmed mussel fields to get into this anchorage and lots of rocks to get into the anchorage as well. But we got there and the first thing we did is basically anchor and then snorkel, dive down on the boat and see what we could see underwater.
And I remember standing on deck, Joe dove down, and we were in this like amazing anchorage with super clear water, luckily, so he could see really well. But I remember just standing there and being like, please, 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 please. And I just repeated it over my head, like, please don't let it be too bad, please don't let it be too bad. You can see like why sailors are so superstitious. I was like looking out for signs and things like that. It really does like mess with your head. But yeah, damage seemed...
Well, you can see there's a big chunk off the forward, like, bottom edge of the keel, the very bottom corner of the keel. And so when we hit the rock, we never actually stopped. You know, we didn't go, we were motoring along at like 5.5 knots. And at the time, it felt like we'd stopped. It felt like we went from 5 knots to 0, and it was terrifying because I've heard stories of boats hitting rocks at that speed, and it's never a good thing. But retrospectively, you would have already probably seen this in the avionics footage, or we can recap it, show it now. But the boat only ever dropped to about 3.5 knots, because what happened with the keel is we just hit the very front bottom corner of the keel with this rock. So we just sort of skimmed over this rock, chipped off the corner of the keel, and you know this is a cast iron keel. It's hard. It's a hard chunk of metal. It's not lead. But yeah, just also in some ways extremely grateful or fortunate that we did just chip the corner. We only just skimmed and touched this rock.
I think,
and we didn't just slam into the side of a big rock or something.
My thoughts are that a wave sort of picked us up and then plopped us just onto it, and then it sort of picked us back over it. That's in my head, my theory. The sea was helping us that day.
Yeah.
As well as hindering us.
In a lot of ways it's extremely unlucky, because if we were 10 meters, 20 meters to the right, it would never have happened. And also, if we were 10 or 20 meters to the other side, to the left, we could have actually like grounded the boat and it would be stuck there. Yeah.
But anyway, we then
stressful
realised that we were like, okay, we weren't going to sink imminently, and we paddleboarded to the shore, and we met up with one of the Dutch boats, sailboat Emma, and we met up with them, who are a lovely family with 3 kids, and they consoled us, didn't they? Yeah,
they basically, we just sat and had beers, and they'd already had some barbecue and some food on the beach. We just sat there with them, and they were like, yeah, don't worry about it. Everyone grounds the boat. There's 2 types of sailors. So there's those who have grounded already, and there's those that will ground. Yeah. And it kind of actually made us feel a lot better, because they had previously grounded the boat, and they just told us what they did and what sort of the process was, and basically just said, yeah, don't worry about it. So what do you do if you ground your boat? So we were really nervous about telling the insurance company, honestly, because we were like, what are they going to do? Are they going to like say we're incompetent, we shouldn't have it, or they won't insure us anymore? And honestly, they were absolutely great. We phoned them and emailed them with exactly what happened, and we're insured with a company called Bishop Skinner, which is in the UK, and the claims handler there, he's been there for like 20 odd years and has very experienced with all sorts of things. We sent him all the photos and videos we could get underwater, And he basically just told us exactly what we need to do, and it made us just feel so much more comfortable that we had a plan, because we were like, what do you do if you've hit this rock? Like, what is the plan of action? Had some idea. I need to get it hauled out. We need to try and see if there's any structural damage, but like, where do we go? Where do you do the repairs? And do you need to do it right now, or can you do it later? But basically, he just wanted to just get first a health check in Vigo, and if that's all clear, then carry on your sailing, but then get a survey later, and then see if there's any work that he's doing.
Which is basically exactly what we did.
So that basically brings us up to now, yeah. Because we're sat here in Lagos, and we've already been hauled out once for the survey, and we're getting hauled out again later this afternoon to then do the boat works, which will take about 2 weeks. But the reason he wanted to get a survey done is because often you can ground your boat, and there's various degrees of like severity of grounding a boat, obviously, but you can ground your boat and it might not show any serious symptoms immediately, or even in a year or two there might be no symptoms, but yeah, in 1, 2, 5 years time, 10 years time, it might come and bite you back in the bum, and you know, something more serious can happen. Like if you have water ingress, your keel bolts or rust or corrode, and you can lose your keel. So he wanted us to just make sure that we do it properly and nothing comes back in a few years time to come and rear its ugly head.
When we got it hauled out in Vigo, they were like, yeah, it's fine, like you could sail the Atlantic on it, there's some issues, but like it's nothing urgent, which was really reassuring. We got it hauled out here and he basically said the same thing. He was like, it is fine, but you need to fix it at some point, so you might as well fix it now. So we thought we were going to have to drop the keel and then re-bolt on the keel.
So basically there's a tiny bit of water ingress in the forward keel bolts now. We're talking like a hypodermic. What's happened is there has been some movement in the hull, and so the keel hull joint, which is full of sealant, is no longer sealed. It's no longer waterproof. So there is some water that's coming up very slowly, and so what they're going to do is basically hang the boat in the slings, scrape out all the sealant, so there's no weight on the keel at this point. Scrape out all the sealant, flush it with hot fresh water, and then leave it to dry for 1 or 2 weeks with the boat just hanging in a spare crane. They want the keel to hang so it opens up the keel hull joint and water can escape. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do, and we have to fly back to the UK for a bit. Not fly.
We don't have to, but because of the Schengen days, it means that it would put us pretty tight on our Schengen days.
It'd be really tight. Yeah.
So we're going to head back to the UK, see some family, do some admin, I guess, and then come back, and hopefully we'll come back and the boat will be fixed, and then we'll be able to sail her over to Morocco. So that's our story of how we grounded a boat in northern Spain.
Yeah, and hopefully it's the only time that we ground a boat. Touch wood.
Yes, touch wood. Touch wood. Obviously, this was a pretty big low point for both of us, but it was another time where the worst experiences seemed to be balanced with these entirely epic ones. The island was incredible. It was smaller than a football pitch, the water was crystal clear, the sand was bright white, and it was utterly untouched with only other sailors visiting. It was Spain's version of a deserted Caribbean island, a tiny little tropical paradise. We later visited the Sierras Islands, which are pretty famous. They were just not the same. It was pretty, but very busy with tourists compared to this little haven. It was our peaceful paradise, and while it took me particularly quite a long time to recover from the feeling in the moment that we hit that rock, it did feel like a nice little respite for a moment here before we had to lift the anchor the following day.
hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.